Hey guys, hope you're well. 19th of December. Thank you to all my new subscribers. You're welcome. Hope you're enjoying the content. Today's job is all about composting. This is my 12-month-old horse manure, which has been turned probably 3 times and ended up in this bin. It's now beautiful. There's a little bit in the left in the bottom, about a barrelful. I'm going to remove this because that's probably going in the potato buckets. This bin here has got the most recent made compost, which is about 6 or 7 weeks old. The heat has gone from this now. It was originally made in here and turned into there. And then in this box, half of this is maybe 12, 13 week old compost. The bottom half is probably been in there 14, 15 weeks. So one came shortly after the other one. And I've just piled them in there. Now, the compost that's most done is in the bottom, obviously, of that bin. The newest compost is there. So what I want to do is empty out this box to get this ready to use compost out, put that compost into here, and then work down through that box to get the slightly newer stuff and put it on that. And then finally we'll get to the bottom of that bin and we can have that older compost on the top here, because I will also start using that. There's 3 types of bacteria that work on compost. So when the heap's really hot and getting up to 65, 70 degrees towards that, ideally it always stays around 65, between 65 and 70. Hottest my bins get to is 66, 67. I always say 70. It never really gets to 70 because of the mixtures I put into it. But when it's up at those temperatures, that's where the thermophiles, the microbes, that's where they thrive, that's where they do their best work, and they are the faster composting microbes that work in the heap when the temperatures are really escalated like that. As the heap starts to cool down to maybe 25 to 30 degrees centigrade, that's when the mesophiles start to take over, because they work at that slightly lower temperature. So they sort of thrive in that range of temperature, and they really get to work then. And then finally, when the heap cools down and goes virtually cold, you've then got the sacrophiles that work on the colder compost. So that's when they do their best work. And they've all these different sorts of bacteria, or these different sort of microbes, they work in those ranges, and that's when they do the best work. So even when you think a heap is composted, it's not. The bacteria and the fungus are still working on it. And actually, compost is no good for plants. It's the bacteria and fungus that work on the compost that turn it into plant food, right? So the plants are actually making connections with the microbes, and the microbes are turning the compost into plant food. That's how the whole beautiful system of nature works. Compost takes maybe up to 5 years. Once it's applied to the soil, it can take up to 5 years to fully break down and become plant available food. So what we think is beautiful, so what we think when we look at this and say that is beautiful finished compost, it's not finished. Even though that has been broken down and it's been in that box for a year, we're calling it compost. It's not. It's probably going to need 4 or 5 more years on the soil to fully decompose. So anyway, let's get into this, and I'll bring you back when I don't want you to think you want to watch me digging for half an hour, do you? It's freezing cold, so yeah, it's going to warm me up this. Okay guys, hopefully the camera is picking this up. You can see this depression here, and there's actually a hole there going in, and it's rats. So rats have moved into these hot bins. This is the first time I've ever had this year. And there's nothing really in here to eat for them, although rats will eat absolutely anything, but there's no real food in here. But what they're doing is they're chewing through the insulation. So I'm getting bits of the insulation from the hot bin in the compost. which is really annoying. So anyway, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to do another video on how I'm going to stop these things. I think the more coming in for the warmth, because these, you know, these hot bins, even though they're cold now, they've stopped composting, there's more heat emanating from the bottom of this. So I think the rat's just coming in here, and you can see the ground is flattened out here. It's, you know, it's all depressed. So I think it's just coming in and lying in here at night to keep, you know, just to keep warm basically. So I need to stop this. I will stop this. I'll show you I'm going to fix it. And I'm also, in a upcoming video, when I do that fix, I'll show you how I'm hopefully going to improve these hot bins and make them even more efficient, and probably make a better compost in the process. Right, anyway, let's get this stuff into that end bin. I'll just show you this stuff here. You can see there's still a lot of organic matter in it. So there's mixings of straw in it, but you can also probably see, oh yeah, that's warm. It's lovely. It's actually lovely and warm, that, but it's the perfect temperature for these composting worms. It's in that mid-range of composting now, and this is the temperature where the mesophile microbes move in and start breaking this down, turn it into an even better compost. Right, the easiest method of emptying this is to take this front off, which is simply 4 screws, if I can find them. Chris has just turned up next door, and I asked him if he'd want to be on camera, so he can explain to you why he's changed over, but he doesn't want to be. So you got to respect Chris's privacy. Right, let's have a look in here. Yeah, Mr. Rat has been in. Let's bring him for a close-up. Yeah, so this is what it's done. It's been tunnelling here. As you can see, that hole goes through into the middle of the heap. It's pulled out all this insulation. They just love chewing insulation, rats. Well, they just chew anything, don't they? Let's face it. So before I do anything else, I've got to get all this polystyrene out of here. It's pretty harmless, I know, but I just don't want polystyrene all over in my compost. But you can see it's nicely broken down, this. Maybe what the rat's looking for is just little bits of like this, which is, what is that? I don't even know what it is now. It's just, there's no smell to it. The smell is gone. Obviously, as the heap cools, the sides cool first. I think that's when the rats moved in. Already seeing lots of worms here. These are composting worms, different to your ordinary bog standard earthworms. And these just love compost and break down compost. I'm going to collect some of these and put them in my worm bin. That little thing there is a cocoon, so that's actually a worm egg, and there'll be anywhere between 1 and 5 baby worms in that. So I'm going to collect some of this, because the worms I had in my vermicompost bin, they evacuated, they moved house, and they actually moved into one of the storage bins that had the hot compost in. So they're in the bottom of that bin now. They just moved out over a week. They didn't like my vermicompost bin, so they moved out into the storage bin. I just think it's so funny. But yeah, so I'm going to try and gather them up. I'm going to be a shepherd and try and gather some of those little guys up and put them back into my new vermicompost bin. I don't know if you could see that on the camera, but there's little cocoons in this. So you see that one there? That's a worm cocoon. There's anywhere between 1 and 5 baby worms in that. There's another cocoon there. So this compost, the worms are absolutely loving this. Yeah, let's get them. Let's get a few stored and ready for repopulating vermicompost towers number 2. What I'm doing here, guys, I'm just removing this from the surface and just working my way down putting it back in there. I'm also going to mix some straw. I'm going to put about 3 or 4 inches in that storage bin. I'm going to put a layer of straw, then put the compost back, because it will dry this out. There's a fine balance when the compost at this stage, when the mesophiles and the saprophiles are working on it, you don't want it dry, because the worms do not like it dry. Worms breathe through the skin. They need a certain amount of moisture around the skin to actually thrive. So if your heap's too dry, you won't get any worm activity, and the bacteria and the fungus that are working on this, they just won't thrive, and they can't live in it. So I always like it to be slightly wetter. The addition of the straw will dry it out a little tiny bit. Well, not much, because the straw soon gets damp. But it also gives extra food for those worms and those fungus and bacteria as they work through this pile. This stuff, I will show you later in the year, will be probably used to earth up the potatoes, because this will be in the bottom of the storage bin now. So come maybe May next year, we'll be earthing potatoes up with this. And what you're seeing here is a bin full of compost. So in reality, that's what you get from a bin that's been maybe filled up and topped up 4 or 5 times. That's the amount you get. This is why it's so difficult, guys, to make compost, to compost all your ground. Yeah, you need an awful lot of material. Green manures are a better solution to this, but I use both. This is what I'd call my green manure. My green manure, instead of rotting in the ground, it just goes in here and rots down, and then it's returned. So it's the same thing really, guys. It's just a little bit more work doing it this way, but I feel I get better, faster results doing this. Right, I'm going to carry on. Well, that's the bin emptied. You see all the damage the rat's done there, just basically chewing the sides of the polystyrene, because it can do. It's taken me more time to pick most of the bits of polystyrene out that compost than it has to turn the bin. But anyway, I'm going to stop that. Not having that. Alright, so swing around to this bin. This compost is 4 weeks older. What a difference, eh? What a difference. The compost under this half of the bin is 4 weeks older still. Anyway, so I'm going to turn this half, this top half, I'm going to turn it into that bin now. This is where all the worms are going to be. So I'm going to take prisoners and I'm going to put them into cell block C, Mark III worm towers. Right guys, I think I've found the ringleaders and the escape committee of the worm operation. They seem to be on this side here. Yeah, they're here. Here they are. So these are the worms that formed that escape committee and evacuated worm towers number 2. So I'm going to have a word with these fellas and tell them, if they don't behave themselves, they're going to get sent to quarantine. Okay. It's just, yeah, there they are, the little rascals. They all moved into me. I don't know why I think this is so funny. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, there's millions and millions of worms. I mean, I suppose if you want compost worms, you can buy. I know you can buy red wrigglers and all sorts of weird and exotic South African compost worms and all kinds of stuff. But to me, these are the best compost worms you can have, because they're native to the soil. They grew in this environment, in this compost. They knocked around as kids. They know the neighbourhood. So, yeah, these are the best compost worms, guys, you can have. Here we are, guys. We're moving into that bottom layer now. This is where all the saprophytes are working on the compost alongside the worms. Beautiful compost worms. There's so many here. So many. Yeah, this bin will absolutely be alive. These fellas. These little fellas were in a box, my Worm Towers 2 box, just literally 3 foot away by the fence. And I suppose every night the escape party would organise themselves and get maybe 500 or 600 across into this bin until eventually they'd all come in here. I'm maybe 2 foot into the bin now, and we're just at the layer of that first compost. There's a brush. Yeah, this is where the worms are now. So the worms have been working through that bottom layer, and they're working their way up through the heap. So it's just that boundary layer I'm at now. So this is just a sample of the worms. There is millions in here. It's just, there's too many to collect, you know. But I'll keep going in the bin. I'll get down a bit further, and if I come across a worm bounty, I'll bring you back. And here we are, guys. I've just got down to that 14-week-old compost. This is it. Absolutely beautiful. Look at this. All the worms in it. Yeah, that's lovely stuff, that. Absolutely beautiful. You find all the bits of plastic and rubbish in at this point. That I would use that now. I would absolutely start putting that on the ground. I don't really need any. I'm going to put a slight dressing in the polytunnel though, because I fill the bin up. I've still got probably 4 barrel full in this one. Yeah, so after filling that, I've got about maybe 12 inches in here of depth. And there we go, guys. That is 15-week compost. Probably about 15 weeks, 14, 15 weeks. Really, really nice stuff. As you go down now, there's no worms. The worms, well, there are worms, nowhere near as many. So most of the worms were in this sort of layer, this sort of height, and it was the layer above the older compost. The newer compost on top was still decomposing. So it was producing heat, and that's what the worms were loving, so they were working in that area. The further down you go, there is still worms, but less worms. And get that sheeted up. So that will be it for today, I think, regarding composting, because I've run out of wheelbarrows. The other 2 are still full of that compost at the end of the plot. I need to put that in the wheelbarrow to get it into the polytunnel. So I'm going to bring some pots from home. Just got to get some sheets on this because I think we've got rain tomorrow. I don't want this to get any wetter. It's beautiful as it is at the moment. Right, guys, that's it. It's freezing. I'm going. I've got the stove lit in the shed. It's lovely and warm in there. So I'm going to make a brew. I'm going to write a few show notes down for the next videos just to remind me what I need to say, because it just goes out of my head as soon as I start looking at a camera. Right. Thanks for watching. Thanks to my new subscribers. I'll see you quite soon.